Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 381. Today, the Amateur Traveler goes to a small island that's been called the British Islands in miniature as we go to the Isle of Man.
I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. This episode of the Amateur Traveler is sponsored to you again by Viator. Viator is a leading provider, especially of day tours. The one I picked out today that I'm interested in doing is one of the duck tours. And for those of you who haven't done it, that's a tour that is on an amphibious vehicle. They're in a number of different cities around the world now. And there is one nearby here in San Francisco. And last time I was at a San Francisco Giants game at AT&T Park, there was the duck tours going by. And there's a sale right now at Viator where you can get $7 off that. For deals like that, go to Viator through the Amateur Traveler link, amateurtraveler.com/tours. Before we get into this week's episode, I do have three news stories for you. The first one comes out of Black Hat, and if you're not familiar with that, it's a hacker conference, and lots of scary hacks come out of that. And one of the things that somebody demonstrated was if you're traveling and someone lets you use their charger, don't, because there is a new hack where you can take a charger and hack into an iPhone and put on a different copy, for instance, of the Facebook app that isn't the Facebook app at all, but instead takes over your phone. But then on the lighter side, a number of people, and among them former Amateur Traveler guest Michael Sanchina, thought that the Twitter account for United Airlines would be at United Airlines. That is not their Twitter account. That is instead a parody account. And so they may have been surprised when they tweet things like, at United Airlines is the true meaning of cattle class, delays with no explanation, food that you should feed to a dog, and staff that don't care. And the fake Twitter account tweeted back, "Oh, expletive, did you eat the food? You're not supposed to actually eat the food." So a few of you may have been surprised by United's new customer care policy. And then lastly, thinking of surprising things, there was an article that went up on Gadling. There were real jobs in tourism that you might be surprised at. A hotel in Vienna is advertising for a hotel jester, one in London for a bedtime storyteller, one in St. Thomas for a coconut safety engineer. And that's the person who climbs the tree to deal with those coconuts that might fall. And then a Holiday Inn in Kensington in London is looking for someone for a job that I'm uniquely qualified for, and that is a human bed warmer. That's somebody who gets in the bed for 5 minutes before you do so that your bed is toasty warm. For links to all three of those stories, check out the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Andrew White, a writer and filmmaker who's come to talk to us about the Isle of Man. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris.
And the Isle of Man, besides being a great name for some future movie, is a small island in between Ireland and England.
That's right, yes. It's actually a nice little island. In fact, this is one of the stories of why the Isle of Man is where it is. It's an Irish giant who threw a piece of ground to a Scottish rival, and it didn't quite get there from Ireland, and it landed in the middle of the sea between sort of Ireland and Britain. So it's now sort of quite in the middle, and it's at almost equidistance from England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. So it's a really nice little island in the middle of the sea.
And now you and I have both said little island, but I don't really actually know how big the Isle of Man is.
Well, it's 221 square miles. Okay. So not tremendously big. It's a great size when you're a visitor to go across to, because it means if you hire a car or you take your own car across, it's a great sort of size to be able to drive round.
Take your own car across, meaning that we would catch a ferry from where to get there?
Well, you can go from Ireland and from Northern Ireland too, and you can also get from England from either Liverpool or Heysham. So you can take a ferry there, or you can always fly there. There's an airport on the Isle of Man at Ronaldsway, and you can fly from most places in Britain now.
Excellent. And why would we go to the Isle of Man?
It's a fantastic place. It really is. It's often said that it's like the British Isles in miniature. And it is almost as if someone's read a guidebook of Britain and said, all these places are great, but why don't we squeeze them all down into one little tiny island? And that's the Isle of Man. It's absolutely amazing. The great thing about it is that because it's actually not part of the United Kingdom, and it's not even part of the European Union, it's got its own little feel to the island. It's very much, if you're familiar with Britain, because it drives on the same side of the road signs look exactly the same, the street signs are exactly the same, the traffic lights are exactly the same, but it's got its own characteristics, its own feelings. It feels like home to a Brit, but it's got a sort of different feel to it as well.
And I'll have to admit my ignorance here. I always assumed, based on its location, that it was part of the UK. So it's an independent country, or it's in the Commonwealth?
It's kind of not in the Commonwealth as well. It's a UK crown dependency, which means its head of state is the English monarch, or the British monarch, I should say. Rather like the Channel Islands, Jersey and Guernsey, but it's completely independent. So it has its own government, it sets its own laws, and it basically does its own thing. It depends on the United Kingdom for a variety of different sort of policies, such as defence and things like that. But basically, it's its own governing island.
Excellent. And what would we do? What kind of itinerary would you recommend for a visit to the Isle of Man?
Well, it's steeped in history, so there's plenty of historic buildings and castles and ruins to go to see there. There's also, one of its really big things is walking. So to go there, to go walking or to go hiking, there are some fantastic trails that you can go to discover the island. And also, if you're a bit of a railway fan or a railroad fan, there are 3 great railways on the island. So they're sort of steeped in history too. So that's really 3 things there to go and see.
Excellent. Well, now let's go back and go in a little more detail. You mentioned history and some historic sites. Which historic sites would you recommend?
One of the great places to go is called the Laxey Reel, which is in the little village of Laxey, but it was home to one of the deepest mines in the area, and it was mainly to mine zinc. And in all mines, obviously water gets into the mine, and they used the power of a nearby stream to make a giant water wheel. And it's actually got, I think it's about 72 foot in diameter. And it's believed to be the largest water wheel anywhere in the world. And it's a fantastic sight, really, when you stand close to it. Really, really awe-inspiring. And it's actually called Lady Isabella.
Is the name of the water wheel?
That's right, yes.
Okay.
So it's got its own little character, and you can get to it via the Manx Electric Railway, one of the railways on the island. And it's actually the start point of the Snaefell Mountain Railway. So there's a railway that takes you all the way up to the top of the only mountain on the island called Snaefell.
And when we say mountain, we're talking about English-sized mountain, I assume.
Well, yes, actually, it's lower than some of our mountains on the mainland of Britain. It's only about 2,000 foot in height.
Okay.
It's still a nice walk. It's a good walk up to the top. And as I say, if you're not feeling that energetic, you can always go up on the tram on the railway.
And you mentioned 3 different railways on an island that's not all that big. So I'm assuming that they date back to the industrial age, to mining and things like that, where they were trying to get the ore and things like that off the island.
That's true, yes. And in fact, there were more railways than there are at the moment. Some of them closed in the sort of 1950s and 1960s. The 3 railways that there are on the island are the Manx Electric Railway. Now, that goes from the capital, Douglas, and goes up through Laxey, up to Ramsey, and that's a distance of around 17 miles. That was built in 1893 and was extended up to Ramsey in 1899, and it's only a 3-foot gauge railway, but the rolling stock, most of the rolling stock that's on there, more than 100 years old. So it gives you a really great feel as you ride on that railway. The other ones are the Snaefell Mountain Railway. That's, as I said, it goes up to the top of the only mountain on the island. Mm-hmm. The best one is the steam railway, really. It's the Isle of Man steam railway. It goes from Douglas, the capital, but goes all the way down the south of the island and round the bottom, and then finishes off at a little place called Port Erin. And that's a distance of only around 15 miles, but it's fantastic because it's all mainly done by steam locomotives. So if you're really into your railways, that's a real sort of attraction there.
And you mentioned that the name of the capital is Douglas, and as I recall, Douglas was one of the very powerful families in the War of the Roses. Is that the same connection?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Yeah, it was worth a guess.
It's also the place where about 3/4 of the population lives as well. So it rose up very much in the Victorian time. Lots of the island came about in the Victorian age, as the Victorians actually wanted to go and play as well as live, and that's where lots of the island sort of came about. So Douglas it has a promenade along the front, very akin to some of the English or North Wales types of proms. It's very akin to Llandudno in North Wales. It's a beautiful promenade along the front of the beach.
And I see that I was indeed wrong, that it dates back to the Celtic for Black River.
That's right. Yes, you are right there.
Well, I had to be right eventually.
Yes.
You mentioned other historic sites. What else should we see from those of us who are history buffs?
Well, Castletown, which lies towards the south coast of the island, is the old capital of the island, and it's dominated by a castle called Castle Rushen. And it's a medieval castle, and it's probably one of the most complete medieval castles in the whole of the British Isles. And it's a beautiful place to go and have a look around. So that's definitely one that I would go and see. In Peel, which is the only really sort of major town on the west coast of the island, that's got its own cathedral, so that's worth having a look at. Peel Castle, which lies on the sort of a headland which overlooks the harbour. That's a great place to go and have a look. It's a ruined castle now, but it's still well worth a look. And there's some fantastic sights to be seen off the headland around that area as well.
Okay. And you mentioned the island as being sort of the UK in miniature. Can you expand on what you meant by that?
Around the south coast of the island, it looks a lot like Cornwall. Mm-hmm. So you've got Cornwall, you've got craggy cliffs and sheer drops, which are just like in Cornwall on the southwest coast of England. Then, as you go further north, you end up going into a belt of hills of where Snaefell is the highest point on the island, and that mountain is in this belt of hills, and that's very reminiscent of the Peak District in sort of central England, and the mountain itself looks as though it's been lifted from North Wales and lifted off and plonked in the middle. So that's there. You've got sort of lovely harbours such as Peel, which very akin to, I suppose, Whitby or something like that on the east coast of England near Yorkshire. So that's very similar to those. And then as you go further north of the island, you've got rolling green hills. Then they go down to sort of flat plains and some lovely sort of lush farming areas around the top. And then it gets down to some really flat areas as it goes down to the sea to the top point of the island is a point called the Point of Ayr, and all that area there looks pretty much like Dungeness, which is on the south coast of England. And it's a cacophony of different geographical features all squashed into this one little island.
And you mentioned that it was great for walking. Do you have a couple favorite walks on the Isle of Man for us?
Yes, well, one of the best walks that you can do is there's a rugged coastal path which goes all around the island called the Rad ny Fwrlien, which translates as the Way of the Gull, and that's about 98 miles, which goes all along the coastline. And that's fantastic because you go around all these craggy cliffs at the bottom, all around down to a little, sort of looking over a little island at the bottom of the Isle of Man. And that has a little island there called the Calf of Man, which is a nature reserve. And really a great spot for looking after backskin sharks and dolphins in the sea. And then as you come round, you go through lovely little villages and harbours, and that's definitely one to go on. And then the other one, which is great, is one called the Herring Way, which is a 14-mile walk between Peel and Castletown. And that's following an ancient route which was formerly used by fishermen to travel between two ports with their herrings, with the fish.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me stop and make sure that I understood you correctly. That first walk, I think you said, was 90 miles?
It depends on which website you look at, but it was about 96 miles.
But it's definitely longer than I'm going to be able to walk in one day.
Oh, yes, definitely.
So
yes.
Is this someplace where people are hiking, or are there cottages set up along the way, like on many places in England where you can hike from station to station, or how would I tackle it?
Well, there is a walking festival which goes on every year in May, where you can go to the island, and it's actually a holiday. So you go over for a holiday, and you are looked after throughout the whole of this sort of week. And you can do many different walks all around the island, and they're guided walks, so you can actually go and you're looked after. And there's even entertainment set on the evenings, so you don't even feel as though you're left alone or forgotten about on an evening on a strange island. You're looked after all the time. But what you could do, that there are lots of places where you can stay en route, so you go on this coastal walk, so you can go. And how many miles would you walk in a day, Chris?
Less than 90. I'm not sure.
Well, if you did say 5 or 6 or 7 or 10,
I could certainly do that. Yes.
10. Well, there you go. So you could do that, and there are places that you can stay en route, and there are websites that you can go to that will help you plan your journey. They will take your luggage to your next port of call, so you could do that. And it's also, there's a very, very good bus network. So sitting down with a bus timetable just to sort of plan your journey and to go back into the centre conurbations is another way of doing that.
So before I go over to England and hike Hadrian's Wall, I can use the Isle of Man as a warm-up trip, it sounds like.
You could do, yes. As I say, it's really, really good for walking. And it's one of the unknown gems, really, because even British people don't tend to realise how good the walking is on the island.
Well, and as you know, one of the questions I usually ask is, what's the best day of the year to go to the island? And it sounds like that might be at least one of the top contenders.
Yes, it gets all the nice warm Gulf Stream air coming over. So it's a good time to go now. One of the times to avoid if you're wanting to walk is when the TT is on. Have you heard about the TT?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
The TT is the Tourist Trophy, and it's a world-famous motorbike race.
Oh, okay.
And it actually goes, the course is one of the major roads on the island. It's a lap of 39 miles, and it's a normal road. It goes through some of the villages in the island. It goes around the mountain and up through the hills. And you can drive it normally. You can actually do it at any time. That's the time to avoid is when the TT is on. Unless, of course, you happen to be a motorbike fan. And then it's the best place in the world to go.
Now, as I was doing some preparation for this, it looked like any time of year I'm likely to need my raincoat or my umbrella.
You could do, yes. It's worth packing. But, like anywhere, you don't get lush green landscapes, do you, Chris, unless you've got
Unless you got the rain.
unless you've got a bit of rain. But I was over there from Sunday until Wednesday of this week, and it was glorious sunshine. We were talking sort of 28 degrees centigrade.
Excellent.
I don't know what that is in old money, but that's certainly, there's some brilliant sunshine to be had sometimes.
And you've surprised me with a few things so far. Is there anything else that's going to surprise me when I get to the Isle of Man?
It's a very friendly island. You'll always be taken care of. You'll always be asked where you come from, and they're always interested in your story. So be prepared to be talking a lot. So they'll keep you chatting. And I think it's also a mecca now for great food.
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
don't be afraid of a great class of restaurant on the island as well now. So there's some brilliant places to go to eat.
And can you give us some examples?
Well, there's one on the harbour front at Douglas called 14 North. And that is I was just eating there a couple of days ago, and that's a fantastic restaurant. It only uses products and materials from the local island, the ingredients from the local island. So you won't have anything there that's not been made or farmed or grown on the island. And that's a really nice way of making sure that everything sort of stays in the place where it should be.
Excellent. Are there other things that differentiate the Isle of Man from England? How can I know that I'm on the Isle of Man rather than in one of the many different places that it looks like, for instance?
All throughout the island, you'll see the three legs of man, and that's their symbol. It's part of their flag. It's part of their ethos. So you'll see that all around. But you'll also see lots of road names and place names in Manx, in Gaelic Manx, which was the old medieval language. So the last native Manx speaker died in 1974, but since then, the language has been resurrected, and there's lots and lots of Gaelic Manx place names and road signs. You'll be able to hear and immerse yourself in that language there, which is completely different from Gaelic in northern Scotland, and it's also different to Irish as well.
Excellent. Here's a question for you. You're standing in the prettiest spot on the whole island. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I'm standing at the top of Snaefell, the mountain, and it's the only place in the British Isles where you can see the Seven Kingdoms. You can see the Kingdom of Manx, the Isle of Man. You can see, on a good day, the kingdoms of England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. And you can see the Kingdom of the Sea, and you can see the Kingdom of Heaven, or the sky.
Okay. I was wondering how you were going to get to 7. Okay.
On a good day, you can see all of those. And it's a challenge. I must admit, it's a challenge to get a good day. When I went up on Wednesday, we managed to see just a little bit of Ireland and just a little bit of England. You have to have a really, really good day to be able to see so far. But there's a nice plaque on the top of the mountain, which points you in the direction of where you look for all of these different areas. So that's a really great place to be. But you literally feel on the top of the world really there. And it's a really calming place as well.
Excellent. I've got 3 more final questions for you. Anything else we should know, though, before we go to the Isle of Man?
It still uses pounds, but it's Manx pounds.
Okay.
So you'll get different change. So if you're using British money, it's not a problem. They don't mind using British money. But you might get different pound notes or change. So that's not a problem. Most places on mainland Britain, banks or whatever, will change them back. But that's one thing to be aware of, I would imagine.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only on the Isle of Man.
There's a lot of customs and things like where you can't say rat on the Isle of Man.
You can't say rat on the Isle of Man.
No, you can't. No.
It's not illegal, but it's considered rude.
It's very unlucky, Chris.
Very unlucky. Interesting.
Very unlucky. You must call them longtails.
Hmm.
Okay, so longtails, not rats. There is a big longtail problem at the moment on this little island at the bottom of the Isle of Man called the Calf of Man, because the longtails are eating the offspring of one of the native birds, and they've been trying to eradicate some of the longtails, but you cannot call them rats. That's very unlucky. It's kind of akin to having to say the Scottish play. You see?
Okay.
So that's how unlucky it is. And also, there's a place between the airport and the capital Douglas called Ferrybridge, and you must say thank you to the fairies for looking after you on your visit to the Isle of Man as you
Okay.
pass.
Is there a sign so that I would know that, or I just know that because I've been smart enough to listen to the Amateur Traveler?
You would certainly know from that point, but there is also a little sign that tells you that you're entering the little village of Ferrybridge. But you have to know that the fairies are looking after you.
Excellent. Finish this sentence. You really know you're on the Isle of Man when what?
When somebody you've never met comes and asks you for your life story. They're always wanting to know about who you are, really.
Excellent.
Yeah.
If you had to summarize the island in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Historic,
Mm-hmm.
exquisite, and friendly.
Exquisite, the natural beauty.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
And friendly.
Excellent. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about your beloved Isle of Man. Is there any place that you write about travel that people should know about?
I mainly write about walking in Britain,
Oh, excellent.
looking after some great places, like that Lake District and the Peak District, and virtually anywhere in Britain, all the British Isles, which is why I do a lot about the Isle of Man.
Excellent. And is there a place where you can find that online?
Yes, my website is Walks Around Britain, which is at walksaroundbritain.co.uk.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on the Amateur Traveler.
You're very welcome.
I got an email this week from David from Oregon who said, thanks for providing the Amateur Traveler podcast. I've found some of the programs a good resource for discovering what's interesting about destinations without having to go there first. It's nice to hear good firsthand travel experiences. I've heard a number of episodes now, but there are some locations I've not heard programs for listed below and was wondering if you had already done some of these or if they were in the works. And David sent me a list of places, and we have done some of them and haven't done others. For instance, the places that we have done shows on include Boston. He said Houston, we've done a show on Texas, but not on Houston. We've done a show on Nashville. We haven't done a show on all of Orlando, but we have done Walt Disney World. In fact, 2 shows, including a live show. We haven't done Phoenix, strangely enough, even though I have traveled there a number of times. And we have done Tampa, Florida, and we have done Toronto. What we have not done is Buffalo, Cincinnati, where I have plans to go next summer, so I'm interested in that. We did Denver as part of a larger show on Colorado, Salt Lake City, and Winnipeg. And I mention that for 2 reasons. One is, in terms of finding what shows we have done, most shows are tagged with the name of the city or the state or the country. And so if you go to amateurtraveler.com/tag/Boston, for instance, you'll find all the content we've done on Boston, both photos and articles, as well as episodes of the show. And also every show in the United States, and these are all domestic shows, or in Canada, the provinces there are all tagged with the provinces, and there's a list of provinces when you go to canada.amateurtraveler.com, or a list of states when you go to us.amateurtraveler.com, and countries when you go to europe.amateurtraveler.com, and Asia, etc. And so I try and make it easy to find the shows that you're looking for, but I know other people have had trouble doing that. And then the other reason I mention this is there's more content that we're missing. And so if you happen to be an expert on Buffalo, New York, or Cincinnati, Ohio, for instance, and you think it's a wonderful place that we should know more about and should travel to, drop me an email and let's see what we can do. Also, one comment in the program, some people have mentioned that the journey to a destination is a big part of the fun of travel. I would have to agree. Would you consider adding this element to your pool of questions you ask your guests? For example, how did you get there, and or what was interesting about the journey? I understand in some cases there wouldn't be much to say, but it could provide some extra details that your listeners might enjoy. And I will keep that in mind. With that, we're going to end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, feel free to do as David did and drop me an email to host@amateurtraveler.com. Or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com if you have any thoughts on your trip to the Isle of Man. You can also join the Facebook community, facebook.com/amateurtraveler, or follow me on Twitter at Chris2X. Don't forget to book your day tours at Viator through amateurtraveler.com/tours. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be